In every woodworking project, there comes a point where you realize that the details matter, but they're not coming together how you hoped. In this project, I had that happen at multiple stages of the build and learned 8 valuable lessons about mastering the details, even when you make mistakes. This project began like any other. After the design phase, it was time to mill down some lumber that I had sitting in my wood racks and miter it into a frame. Now let me pause and point out that you don't need the exact tools I'm using in this video to accomplish the same things, and throughout this project, I'll be putting some cheat sheets on screen to give some suggestions on other methods for doing the same things with different tool sets. With everything milled down to size, it was time to cut in some miters for the frames, so I set the saw blade to 45 degrees, grabbed my miter gauge, and after clamping everything in place, I began to make my cuts. The first few cuts I made using the miter gauge on the left side of the blade, and then to do the follow-up side, I used another miter gauge without a fence and used the table saw fence as a guide to get my final length for the other miter. Okay, so the mitered corners came together beautifully, and now it was time to make a rabbet for the back panel. I laid out my dado stack, which is just a large group of blades that get put together to make larger cuts partially through a workpiece, a tool that, strangely enough, while I don't feel it's any more dangerous than a normal saw blade, is banned apparently in some places in Europe. So if that's you, just take advantage of one of the alternatives that I had up on the screen a little bit earlier. With the blades installed, I went ahead and inset it the same distance as the thickness of the French cleat that I'll be using to hang this frame on the wall. I used an aluminum setup block to give myself a good reference for a 1/4-inch blade height. These are inexpensive and really helpful, but by all means not necessary at all. So far, everything's working out quite nicely, but I'm realizing that I haven't really told you what I'm building. So let's head over to the computer and take a look at the design. See, my kids all share a laptop for doing their homework, which works out great, but we don't have room for a full desk in any of the common areas of our house. This means that the computer and all its cords and accessories migrate around our home. I've picked it up off the couch, the floor, the coffee table, the kitchen counter, pretty much every surface it could be set down on. To fix this, I designed a fold-down laptop storage desk that will get mounted to our living room wall. One element I wanted this design to have was some sort of visual element for when it is in the closed position. After all, who wants to see a blank rectangle of wood taking up a chunk of their wall? It was here that I decided to try out 2 things I've never done before: veneering and marquetry. 2 highly detailed and somewhat complicated techniques that are brand new to me and will be featured prominently in the main living area of our home. I mean, what could go wrong? It's important to lay everything out so that it is square, just like it's going to be. And then I figured out with this double square the depth of all of my rabbets, and I'm just moving them to the top of the frame. Then with a tape measure, I'm able to measure from each of those marks that I made to get the final size for my back panel. Here I'm just cross-cutting with my track saw, and it was just the easiest thing that I could think of with this width. And then I began my glue up, and really the glue up went without a hitch. I want to take you in close here and show you something that I've noticed, and I'll try to explain what I think has happened. I'll let you know how I'm going to fix it. So everything was cut to width at the same time, or ripped to width. And as you can see here, despite the fact that I am completely even on the bottom, at the tops, I am not. And so what I'm pretty sure it is I ripped things down a little bit differently than I normally do, because I did it over on the bandsaw. I just wanted to try something different. I ripped them down, left them a little bit on the big side so that I could run them across the jointer, and I ran them the exact same number of times. I was pretty certain. I don't know, there was an inaccuracy somewhere. How I am going to fix this, you can fix it with sandpaper for sure. I'm gonna run a smoother over it, and we'll get this thing dealt with and fixed up. So let's do that now. With the wall frame evened out and mostly finished, it was time to work on what will be the front panel and desk portion of the piece. I'm using some 18mm shop-grade birch plywood as my substrate and used my track saw to cross-cut it to size. I started to cut some cherry edge banding to go around the desk front, starting by cutting one end to 45 degrees and then taking it against the actual plywood piece to figure out where to cut the other end. Now, you might think that I would take my time and do this all the way around the panel before moving on, but I like to live on the edge and changed gears here to cut some walnut and curly maple veneers to use for the front of the desk. Watching back my process did make me wonder, how many other people jump between tasks on a project? Are you the kind of person who follows a process from point A to Z, or are you like me and make a lot of detours along the way? If you like to keep things in order, start your comment with A to Z, or, if you're American, A to Z. And if you're more free-flowing, start it with detour. When you leave a comment that starts with either of these, it'll help me to know you're paying attention, and I'll be sure to give you a big thumbs up. This curly maple panel had a little bit of bow in it, and I didn't want to risk having it chewed up by the surface planer. So what I did is used my favorite type of woodworking double stick tape by X-Fasten and put it on a sled, and it came out absolutely perfectly. I suppose I should let you know that I do my best to put Amazon affiliate links in the description to the products and tools I use. If you see something I'm using that you've been wanting to purchase, it does help the channel out if you use my links to make that purchase, but please, no pressure at all. Here I'm prepping these edges using the in-out method on the jointer. Edges marked in are jointed with the face into the fence, and those marked out have the face out from the fence. This ensures that any small discrepancies in the angle of my jointer fence are canceled out to give me the tightest glue seams possible. Then, for panels like these, all you really need to do to clamp them together is to use some masking tape and have a little bit of patience. Once the glue had dried overnight, I input my designs into my laser cutting software. I use Lightburn and started cutting out my pieces. So I've been using the laser cutter to cut out all these pieces of cherry, cut out the star for this marquetry, and I hate it. Lasers have a kerf, and I forgot to account for the kerf. Apparently I've got a hand to fit everything. I'm going to figure this out and I'll get back to you. Unfortunately, what I had hoped would be a quick and simple process with the laser necessitated a change of plans. Computer-controlled tools had to make way to manually fitting individual pieces into place. Switching the process this way showed me that there are so many more ways to accurately do marquetry, and had I gotten stuck in a mindset of doing everything with the laser, I'm actually not sure I would have been able to get the project done. I also found that various tools around the shop were better suited to different tasks. Larger pieces could get finessed at the miter saw, but after sending a few pieces flying at my face as they blew apart into shards, I switched over to a combination of the bandsaw, oscillating belt sander, and a shooting board. There's still a lot more marquetry to do and some more lessons learned to share with you, but I want to take a moment and thank you for watching so far. Your time spent engaging with this video encourages me, and it shows YouTube this video is worth showing to others on the platform. If you like what you see, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with others. Or don't. No one's telling you how to watch YouTube here or anything. I should also let you know that I've put together full-color step-by-step plans for this project, which you can find on my website. The plans themselves are for a piece that doesn't have the marquetry, but I am including my Fusion 360 file as well as a file with the pattern I used for creating the marquetry, if that's something that you want to try out. Creating plans like these take a lot of time, so I appreciate your support of the channel. Link is in the description. Cut the bevel on the wrong side. I don't have enough room to fix it. I've got to cut something different now. Until the day someone creates a board stretcher, cutting things too short isn't very easy to come back from. And that's why in this project, I found it is extremely important to buy extra material. I usually aim for overbuying by 20%, but sometimes, depending on what gets mixed up and how many defects are in the lumber you purchase, you may find you fall short even when you purchase a little extra. I underestimated the material lost during the resawing process and nearly didn't have any remaining stock long enough to replace the piece I'd messed up. Fortunately, my scrap pile had a few extra pieces of cherry from a previous project that were actually from the same hardwood lot, and I was able to make it all work. From there, I was able to begin resawing these cherry boards, jointing one face between each cut and cleaning it up on the thickness planer so that I could veneer the inside of the desk's surface. Again, I needed to joint these pieces together, and this time I went to the track saw. I've run into a little bit of a problem here. Details matter, and when it comes to the star on this marquetry piece, I don't like the corners. The filler has worked everywhere else. I had some issues on some of the points that ended up with material that was thinner than the rest of the material that I used. And I don't want to thin everything out anymore. So I think I'm going to chisel out those corners and I'm going to piece in some new pieces. I know it can be tempting to keep things tidy and throw away all of your off-cut pieces, especially the ones that seem impossibly small and insignificant. But don't do it. Well, okay, let me clarify. Do it, but only after your project is completely finished and you're certain everything looks good. The thing about workpiece cutoffs is that they are from the same stock you've made the rest of your project from, and that means that when there is an issue, you have the best chance of hiding a repair if you use that same material. Now, a bonus tip is cross-grain patches rarely look good, and I'll actually do yet another repair to fix this repair you see now a little bit later on because of that. So, I have a problem. As it turns out, I'm a newbie to using a vacuum press. I'm using one of those hand pump kits. Unfortunately, the footage got lost, of course. But as it turns out, if you leave any material overhanging when you're veneering, it will snap in the press. And of course, when it snaps, sometimes it goes too far. Anyways, long story short, to clean everything up after everything dried, I am now a solid 1/4 inch on every single edge, too small on my front lid. Two ways that I see to clean it up. The first way would be to cut down the frame, which would then take me down to a 1/2 inch frame. I don't know that I'm comfortable with that. So my alternative, and what I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to turn this into a design feature. I'm going to make some more edge banding now, and it is going to be made out of, I think, maple, to just kind of bring together some other colors here. And maple or walnut? I got some decisions to make, but stick around. And I chose to go with the contrast of maple edge banding in the end, and I'll tell you right now, I am so glad that I did, because it ended up looking so sharp. In the upcoming clip, you're going to see me using some of these, I think Rockler calls theirs bandy clamps. They're actually hard to find in Canada. But I ended up ordering a few, and while I like them, what I will say is they're not really necessary at all. In fact, I don't have enough to make it all the way around a piece if I want to do all of my edge banding at the same time. And so you can see here that I used them in conjunction with some parallel clamps and some masking tape. All you need is the masking tape. I'll tell you that right now. One thing that I've learned to be very careful to do when it comes to making things like this is, sure, lay things out in the plans, but at the end of the day, what you really need to do is make some real-world measurements to really make sure you understand the actual spatial existence of how everything is going to work with one another, which is what you see me doing right here. Okay, first of all, new merch available on my website. Check the link in the description. I've got this clamped into position here, and what I'm going to do now is start cutting some divider pieces just to hold this where it's supposed to go. And once I do that, we can glue that piece together, and this will be able to drop right in, and we'll go from there. Once I got the divider to fit perfectly, I transferred its size to my workpiece using a stop and a marking knife to get me an exact match. I've added an inexpensive laser attachment to my saw, as you saw there, because I cheaped out and bought the non-laser version, and with a couple shims from an old dado set, I've actually gotten it perfectly dialed in, which made it really easy to cut perfectly to my line, and this glue up went very, very smoothly. After doing these things, since the glue had dried on my maple edge banding, I switched tasks again and used my small cordless router and a flush trim bit to even it up to the desk surface. I then centered the frame of the desk on the now too big desktop and marked my lines so that I could get everything nice and flush with one another all the way around using the miter saw and my table saw. From there, I went back to working on the interior dividers, spacing and cutting things down to what I felt was the perfect size. So at this point here, I am going to take this piece, butt it up against here. We're going to cut it down to the size that we want it. And then what I need is a pocket for the power adapter. That's what this hole was for. The power adapter, power brick, is going to sit in that pretty much permanently. And then I want another spot here so that either the mouse, this computer, the trackpad stopped working, but the mouse or for some pens and pencils. So that's going to be over on this side here. So we'll cut dividers for those, but I'm just going to cut this down to size and we'll go from there. Once everything was cut to size, I spent some time doing an initial glue up of each of the individual pieces. And here you see that I'm using some wood glue for strength, as well as some CA or super glue and activator to give myself an instant bond and act as a clamp. Then I used my little glue spreader in a paper towel trick to clean out the excess glue from the corners before moving on to taping off all of my glue surfaces to get ready to apply some finish to the divider pieces, since it will basically be impossible to get them finished later on. You just wouldn't be able to reach inside once they're glued into place. And so here I'm using Osmo's top oil. It worked really, really well, really easy to apply and to clean up mistakes later on. I really highly recommend this finish and Osmo's Pollux oil as well, which I'll use as my main finish a little bit later on. So I let that cure, and while it was curing, I went ahead and began to mark out for the piano hinge that I am using here. And once I had it marked out, I put a 1/4 inch bit in my trim router and set its depth to the same depth as the hinge and began to route out this channel for it. Now, I made a mistake at one point. The router slipped and took a chunk out of things. And so here you can see that I am chiseling everything square, or rectangular, I guess would be the correct term, to make it easier to do a patch job here. And so I am chiseling this out right now. Then I'll use some super glue and a piece of cherry that I can glue into place. Once that's set, I took a saw and cut down right even with the little piece of walnut that was remaining here, and then chiseled back flush with the cherry to create myself some room to then put a walnut patch into place and do the whole process over again. One of the challenges this piano hinge brought with it was that it's an antique bronze finish, and everywhere I looked I could not find the right size screw to match this, so I decided to make my own. I took just some cheap screws, heated them up, and then doused them in linseed oil, and it turned out great, a perfect match. As I mentioned previously, when you try to patch things across the grain, it's pretty obvious, as you can actually see next to my left hand here, one of the areas that I patched. And so I cut out complete pieces slightly oversized that I am double stick taping down and then tracing out with a marking knife and popping off. What we'll end up doing, I'll trace that out with a pencil to make it easier to see, and then using a combination of my router set at about 1/8 of an inch or so and some chisels and picks will open up a space that will fit absolutely perfectly this new piece before using some super glue to glue it back down into place. And I've got to say, honestly, this is the way to do it. If you're going to do an inlay, start with something so that you can create a negative of the actual inlay piece, rather than going piece by piece trying to fit your inlay to the hole it's meant to go in. It is worlds different, way easier, way more accurate. It's definitely the way that I would do this going forward. Of course, I got the whole project put together at this point, closed it all up, and noticed that everything had shifted slightly, and so I needed to reset where the hinge was on the lid. Fortunately, it's actually a pretty easy process. You can either cut some plugs, or you can use some dowels, drill things out to the exact diameter and glue it back into place. And I was able to just take a little shim and line everything up and screw that all back together. Then it was time for these gas spring strut things. They're actually designed to go the opposite direction to lift a lid, but I'm using them to hold everything in place. And so far, they're actually working really well. It was a bit of a process trying to figure out exactly where on here to put them so they didn't run into anything, didn't try bending the brackets. And then my general idea had been that I wanted to use magnets to keep this whole thing closed, and actually that really didn't end up working. It looked like it was going to, but as soon as the laptop desk was vertical, it started to leave a gap, and so I came up with an alternate arrangement. I had some of these inexpensive jewelry box catches left over from a project from about a year ago. They're super cheap. I don't actually even know how long these are going to last, but it was a pretty simple task to just screw them into place. And I actually think it's going to work out better with my family. Chances are they would slam into this thing and it would come flying open, because those struts really want things to open up. And then that would be a big issue. Like I was saying before, I finished this whole project with a couple coats of Osmo Pollux oil in the satin clear finish. I love this stuff. It's so easy to apply, so easy to fix up. And really, at this point, everything's done. I was able to put it in my living room, and it does exactly what I wanted it to do. And this just goes to show that despite how much we can put pressure on ourselves to do everything perfectly the first time, the wonderful thing about woodworking is generally, with a little bit of know-how, you can fix just about any mistake and sometimes end up with them actually turning out better than you ever could have imagined. I'm just going to leave it here for you to enjoy a few more beauty shots. But remember, until next time, make sawdust, not excuses.